First in the agenda is Provost Baucom, and he will, at the end of his presentation, introduce Margot Rogers and Julia Smith. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. My thanks to Dean Bourne and our host data science. Jim sends his regrets. He's at a memorial service for Professor Lucian Bass. Would have been here otherwise, but that was an important thing to honor. I thought I would just give a couple of updates and talk about two of the review processes that are underway, the May 4th review, the health system investigation. I'm then going to turn to Margot Rogers and Julia Smith to talk about what we are learning about actions by the new presidential administration and their impact on higher education. And then I'll say something a little bit more personal very briefly at the end. On the May 4th review, as a quick reminder, former U.S. Attorney Mary McCord is leading the review. And as Jim said at the last meeting in December, I think, he's asked her to take this on. We're very grateful to Mary for doing this. And the charge that he's given her is to develop a timeline of the events that unfolded over the days leading up to the encampment in late April and early May, to review the university's policy framework related to expressive activity, campus safety and security, including the policies that were enacted or modified earlier this year. So that's within her remit to ask her to take a look at those, to recommend any improvements we might make to policies and practices that account for safety, everyone's legal rights, our responsibility to each other. And he's asked her to focus on the university's actions and decisions. The actions of the state police and the local police are not within her purview. That's not something that the university can do. And the intention is and remains for her report to be made public. Mary was on grounds in early January. A lot of administrators were here. She had a chance to meet with a number of us. She will now be returning over the coming weeks, and she'll be meeting with students, faculty and staff, people who are present. She'll be reaching out to people, but she will also be welcoming people contacting her and saying that they would like to talk to her. Jim and I will not know who those conversations are with. Strongly encourage you, if you would like to talk to Mary, please do. Strongly encourage you, if there are people you think to talk to Mary, please do. And then just a bit of a reminder of her background. She's the executive director of the Institute for Constitutional Advocacy and Protection, which is at Georgetown University's Law Center. And she previously served at the U.S. Department of Justice. She is a true professional. So we're grateful to her. We're grateful for this work. And again, please, if anyone wants to talk to her, please do. As an update on the Health System School of Medicine investigation, I've remained out of this. This is an investigation that is being conducted by the law firm Williams & Connolly on behalf of the Board of Visitors, but I can report back on an update that Rector Hardy shared with the faculty of the School of Medicine within the past week. And some key points from the update. The investigation is nearing completion. Thus far, Williams & Connolly has reviewed thousands of documents, including email communications, records, policies. They've talked to more than 90 people thus far, and in the process of scheduling or have already scheduled a remaining round of interviews. They have reached out to people, and they've had people reach out to them. So it's been both a process of people saying that they would like to talk to them, and the team from Williams & Connolly talking to people who they believe have information that they believe, the law firm believes, is relevant to the investigation. They anticipate that they will have a report to share with the Board of Visitors toward the end of February. The board will then receive that report and will deliberate on that one. And that is the extent of what I know about them.
I have a further update I'll deliver during my part.
That's great, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to turn now to Margot Rogers and Julia Smith. Like all universities across the country, we are paying careful attention to the actions and policies of the new presidential administration and their impact or potential impact on higher education. We've talked about this for some time, trying to understand the relationship between executive actions, actions that might be legislative, actions that might be at the policy or the agency level, to be sure that we understand what they are. Margot Rogers, who is the Vice President for Strategic Initiatives at the university, has had a very distinguished career, including serving as the Chief of Staff to a former Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan, in the Obama administration, and Julia Smith, who's joining us. Julia, I think you're with us. Julia Smith, who is our lead contact working with federal agencies, working with colleagues in the federal government in Washington, D.C. They have been putting in a lot of work on this. And a lot of work, obviously, since the inauguration on Monday. Margot is going to give an update. And the only thing I would say is this is still, we're still only 9,600 hours into an administration. They've been working kind of nonstop, but it is still, for us in many ways, early to understand exactly what it is that has been announced or intended. So Margot, let me turn to you. And Walt, and we'll be able to take questions and answers on all of these pieces. I thought we'd just kind of go ahead and get it out. We can put all the,
Will you?
and then I'll come back up.
After?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then I'll pop back up. Yeah, I'm not going away. Yeah. So Margot,
Do I come up there, Ian?
how do you want to do it? Yeah, because I think for the camera purposes for people.
Oh, great. Okay. Camera's my favorite.
Yeah.
It's good to see you all. Thanks, Ian. For those of you I haven't met, I'm happy to be here among you. Julia is online. I did just confirm. So she works on this full time right now. That's pretty much 24/7. She lives in Washington and also has, I'm not sure how distinguished my career is. She does in fact have a long and distinguished career working on federal government relations in Washington, particularly in higher ed. So she opened the University of Arizona's office in Washington before she joined us a few years ago. And prior to that, she spent 7 years at AAU working on a range of issues, including a heavy dose of science. So we are very lucky to have Julia on our team in Washington, but that's why she's not here in person today. So Julia's full-time job is to represent UVA in DC. We are here today basically to provide a brief update on what's been going on over the last 100 or so hours. Because I'm here in person, I'll take the lead. But Julia, I hope you will correct me if I misstate anything, and I'll call on you a couple of times over the next minutes. Changes in administration often bring big changes in policy. This one is no exception. Our job is to track those changes and to try to ensure that the appropriate people at UVA know about them and have the information that they need to make any necessary decisions. Obviously, you all read the papers, I'm sure. There have been an awful lot of executive orders over the last few days. We've spent, as Ian indicated, most of our hours since then reading through them and trying to figure out what this means for us. And that is, we're at the very early stages of that process, but I thought it might be useful to talk about the kinds of things we're executive orders, some specific recommendations about people you and your colleagues can reach out to if they have questions or issues in specific areas, and then talk about a few next steps. So we're seeing basically 3 kinds of executive orders. The first require immediate action. So examples of that are changing the name from the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, or withdrawing from the World Health Organization. So here's the order and here's the action. The second directs the second sort of category, direct federal agencies to take some action over the next 2 to 4 months. So examples of that are asking the Department of Education or the Justice Department or any federal agency to issue guidance to direct contractors and grantees, people like us, to take steps in keeping with a particular executive order. So there's this window of time built in where the agency is supposed to do work to explain something and to dig into something further. And then the third category is those where it's actually just not clear what the next steps are. So for us, for UVA, most of the executive orders that will have impact on our day-to-day work are in the second category. So to Ian's point, we are in kind of a wait and see position with respect to many of the executive orders. That said, we're trying to make sure that the people who might feel very immediate impact, and I'll talk about who some of those might be in a minute, know where to go for help. So here are a few examples. The Vice President of Research, and Lori's here, Lori McMahon, for those of you who haven't had an opportunity to hear her directly. So Lori, if you want to add something here, you let me know after I finish this little bit about this. Lori's communicated with all faculty recipients of federal research dollars, letting them know that if they receive any communication from their program officer, they should reach out to her office so that her office can help you navigate the communication that you've received. So that's one very tactical sort of takeaway. The second is constituencies of the International Students and Scholars Office and the international arm of Human Resources Office know that those offices stand ready to answer any visa questions or international travel questions or other inquiries that they might have. we have law students who found out yesterday that they lost the jobs that they were anticipating starting this summer in the honors program at the US Department of Justice. The law school's career services have immediately reached out to those students and are helping them navigate that. And then there's been some immediate action with respect to some NIH and a few other agencies. And I know some of you may have either read about that or received communication. And Julia, I thought since you are most on top of where that stands, you might provide a little more detail on that. Does that work?
Yep, that works. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for having us. Jumping right in with regard to what we're seeing at the agencies, I'll offer a little bit of context in that while this has felt very jarring, this is actually not the first time this has happened. It is within the purview of any new administration to do these types of reviews. And we went through this in 2017 as well. What is typically in place to prevent the disruption that we're seeing right now is the use of transition teams. In previous administration changes, the incoming administration, this go around used a very limited model for their transition teams, which is why so much of this is happening now on this side of the inauguration as opposed to the front end. So the agencies that are impacted are the Department of Energy, the National Institutes of Health, CDC, FDA, EPA, DOD. As of right now, the National Science Foundation has not been impacted as directly, and that is largely because the National Science Foundation does not actually sit in a cabinet level role, and so their funding model is much more aggressively controlled by Congress, and the purview of their operations is controlled by Congress. So we expect there will at some point be a review process that's instigated there. To date, that has not begun. So what is happening at these agencies? It is differing agency by agency. I think NIH is getting perhaps the most press as far as what's happening there. We've seen a communications freeze. We're hearing about specific research that active research awards that faculty are getting notified across the country that their research has been canceled, and that their grant funding has been canceled. To our knowledge, that has not occurred at UVA, and we did ask in the communication that came out through Lori's office yesterday that if you hear directly from a program officer specific to your work, to please contact us immediately so that we can understand what's happening and get supports in place as soon as possible. The communications freezes are obviously very jarring. If you're not able to communicate with your program officer, that's going to be potentially quite disruptive to your work. So if that happens, we also would like to know about that. We're trying to track all of that to get a whole picture of the impact to the institution. You're also hearing, as I'm sure, anyone that's been reading the news, that DEI entities across these agencies have been dismantled, that these staff have been placed on leave, and leave with pay with imminent termination sort of in the cards. So related to that, there are some research programs that have been targeted, although the communications specific to the agencies have not said anything about those programs. So I do want to draw attention to that. But with regard to environmental justice, trans research, transgender research, LGBTQ research, all of those have been sort of flagged in the press as being focus areas. So we're keeping an eye out for anything related to that as well. Most of these agencies have indicated that their goal is to be done by February 1. We are holding them to that. The administration is within its rights to conduct these reviews through that time period. And so if it arises that is extended in any way that continues to create issues on campus and across the research enterprise, obviously we'll engage the resources available to us after that date to try to mitigate that. I have been in contact with most of the Virginia delegation. Both of our senators are, we're tracking this very closely. They're sending their support, and they want you all to know that they're not they're not taking this one sitting down. They're following this very closely and look forward to being very supportive in case if and when we need them with regard to support for our students, faculty, staff, and our research enterprise. I would also just take 2 seconds to point out that what also is happening that we're seeing across the board is that a lot of our faculty, including many of you, are getting communications from society memberships that you have, scientific societies, associations, et cetera. And many of them are compelling faculty to undertake certain actions, including but not limited to contacting the press, contacting your members of Congress, contacting attorneys that are offering either pro bono or at-cost services to help with regard to your research areas. And I would just say a lot of those communications are not flagging for faculty that there are policies in place at your institutions that you're going to want to follow in doing so. And would just encourage you all to please check in with the relevant offices. There are restrictions in place as far as hiring outside counsel. I am happy, you know, Margot said 24/7. She's not kidding. I haven't slept much. I've slept enough, but not much. And I absolutely don't mind taking your calls. I've been taking them late at night, early in the morning. I am here to serve the university and your interests. So please give me a call if you're concerned about something with the delegation. They may already well be tracking it. And if I can save you that effort, I'm happy to do it. As the primary liaison with the congressional delegation. And obviously, you know, same goes for contacting the press. You all have communications offices and would just strongly encourage you to work through them with regard to press around what is happening. So with that, I'm going to kick it back to you, Margot, and if I missed anything, please let me know.
Thanks, Julia. Lori, did you want to add anything before I kind of bring this section to conclusion?
I don't have much to add. I guess we can wait till the questions and I can provide some answers to those.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Okay, so obviously, as Ian's sort of framed at the beginning, and as I started, we are very much in a wait and see mode. As we receive more guidance from federal agencies, we'll have a much clearer sense of the actions that we are required to take, and also the decisions that our executive leaders will need to take. Finally, I just want to flag that a number of executive orders have already been challenged in court, and at least one injunction has already been issued. So that creates another even more uncertainty than people might already feel, because we don't know when these things will sort of come to fruition and when the dust will settle. But in the meantime, as I hope you get a sense of from our presence here and how we've been spending our time over the last few days, we are here to help. And if you have questions, if you need guidance, obviously, if it's in the research area, please reach out to Lori. If it's in the general relations area, please reach out to Julia. If it's in the communications area, please reach out to Brian Coy, who's the university spokesperson. And we will work on all this together. So with that, Ian, I will turn it back over to you, and I appreciate everyone's time very much.
Great, thanks. So I know there are a lot of questions. These are really substantial issues. So those are my updates. I'll say something more personal in a minute, but let's just kind of open things up to take any questions that we can, either from me or Margot, Lori, Julia, others who are in the room. Walt, I think you might have had a question, or maybe you just want to know if I was going to be here.
Really quick.
So, yeah.
Can you tell me Julia's last name?
Smith, sorry, Julia Smith. You should be able to find her in the index. Okay. Julia, you want to just say what your email is if somebody needs to email you to set up time to call?
Hey, everyone, pay attention because it's complicated. It's julia.smith@virginia.edu.
I'm always impressed when people do the work with IT to develop that. I'm still MMR2F, which is not intuitive.
If I ever wanted a member of Congress to find me, the initials and the letters and numbers weren't going to cut it.
Jim, and maybe Maite Bree, you can help with this. If there are any sort of informational points of this sort to kind of follow up on afterwards, we can try to gather them and share in a correspondence.
And we'd like to point, there's always non-senators here and they're welcome, but the dialogue is for the senators and the speakers.
Great, thank you. Yes, Jeri.
Easy question, I think. Mary McCord, you said she's going to be welcoming other input.
Yes.
Is there going to be communication of that to faculty and staff, or what is the method? Are we supposed to communicate that? How do people know, and how do they get in touch with her?
It's a great question. So she will be reaching out to some people because there's some people who clearly, we're actively participating. She'll be doing that. I deliberately am outside the process of people saying, I would like to talk to Mary. It needs to be screened from my office for obvious reasons. And so Mary will be reaching out. Exactly what form that will take, to be frank, I'm not sure of at this point. I don't know if there's anyone from the president's team who knows exactly how she's going to do it, but she will actively be saying, here are ways to be in touch with me. Here are ways to contact me, either individually or in some other form. So that will come through her and not through our office.
I read you once online.
Yeah.
So as Senator said, I just came from a faculty meeting, and faculty around the campus who hold administrative positions in DEI are in DEI committees or who have research funding on DEI and health equity. We expressed a lot of anxiety related to political and legal changes in this realm. They expressed concerns related to their job security, funding, and how to address DEI concerns brought up by students. What can we do to support them?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So it's broadly a question about a faculty senator who'd been in a meeting with a number of people who are in DEI offices. As I take it, I'm sort of summarizing. I might have gotten this either formally or in some role. What can we be doing to support them? So I would say that the most specific thing that we can do to support people at this point is let us know particular concerns. Let us know really individual things. I'm worried about this. I've heard that this might be happening. What is the status, of a project that I'm working on? Is it federally funded? Is it funding contingent? Is it internally supported? So we can try to give you really particular information, if at all possible. And I just think that's the best thing that we can try to do. There is so much that is both sort of general unknown that will soon become quite particular. And the more the particular is that we know, the more that we can then provide that feedback, that counsel, that guidance, that advice on where people actually are in situations. I don't know more than that at this point, but I think that's the most helpful thing. And again, please feel free just to be in touch with my office directly. I might not individually be able to respond, but we've got a large team that understands it's a faculty affairs issue, right? What do we need to be thinking about faculty affairs? Is it an issue related to student life, student financial support that we can work with Steve Farmer and his team? Is it something about a grant in a research area that we can then turn to Lori and get answers? So bring us particulars. We will move on them as quickly as we can, and we'll be completely transparent with you. In some cases, we'll be able to say, yes, we can provide particular reassurance. We know exactly what the situation is. If we don't, we'll let you know that too. Because there are some areas in which our values do not change and we're bound by the law. And both of those are true simultaneously. We work within a constitutional republic, so we honor that and our values don't change. We will do everything we can to ensure that it is true that our values do not change. We'll follow up, bring us particulars, and we will work on it as quickly as we can and be as open and honest with you as we possibly can on all of the things that come. Lori, others in the room, I don't know if you've got any just further advice on that. So, Lori, go ahead, and then I'm going to turn to Walt, and then
I'll just restate what we already heard from Ian and from Julia. Anything that's grant related, please contact me. I can help support you. We do know, again, as Julia stated, that there are some awards, federal awards, DEI related, that have been terminated. We have not heard that here at UVA. So, and my general advice is to stay as calm as possible and continue to follow your passions and to do the work you're here to do. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what we're going to learn tomorrow. We are committed to updating you as often as we have new information to help you navigate. Just as much as you can, stay calm and follow your passions and do your work.
yeah, but Brian, apologies. I'm reading poorly. Yeah, Brian. Yeah, and then
Yeah, thank you for being here and for all the presentations. I mean, I think everything that's been said is right on point. That we should be calm and we should report specific instances. But if some of the things, scrubbing of websites, if the things that have been said in executive orders, if the things that have been said in press conferences and the inauguration were said on our own grounds, we'd be talking about whether a hostile climate was being created. And I think it's pretty fair to say there's a hostile climate being created across higher education. So I understand our defensive posture. What I'd like to know is what climate do we support and how are we going to speak as soon as possible to students, faculty, to staff about what we do stand for. Because right now, appropriately, we're on defense. But if you look at appointments, if you look at the white papers that have gone into things that have occurred over the last 96 hours, the future is pretty clear.
Right.
And I don't think we can continue to be reactive. Too many people on grounds are too concerned, too apprehensive, are not able to keep calm, are vulnerable, are wondering about their status in this institution and their status in this country. And I know we have a statement on statements, but I think there's a bipartisan way to say that we stand for things, and we're going to continue to stand for them independent of what's happening in Washington, DC.
Sure. It's a great question. So let me answer just as the person standing here. And so I'm speaking in my own voice. We stand for and we believe in free expression. The Constitution binds us to that, and it obliges us to protect it. And we will follow that constitutional commitment, not only because we are bound by it, but because it is intrinsic to our values and to what a great university is. We stand for academic freedom. We stand for the freedom of students and faculty and staff to determine the course of the study that they wish to pursue, the research they wish to conduct. We do not necessarily control the sources of that research support. That has always been a partnership between the university and a number of entities outside the university. So we cannot control that. But we stand for the freedom of faculty members and staff and students to pursue studies they wish to pursue, the research they wish to pursue, and the questions they wish to ask. We stand for the dignity of all people. We stand for the reality of the world is straight and queer and trans and multiple. We stand for the idea that is enshrined in the first words of our nation's Declaration of Independence, the idea of the we, a people held together by the pursuit of truth. And that we is vast and glorious, that it internally differs, and that the majesty of that we is that truth accommodates and is animated by the reality that we are multiple. We stand for those things. And we believe in the law. And we will follow the law. None of it changes.
Online.
Yep.
Years a little bit. What's the situation with NASA grants?
What's the situation with NASA grants? Let me turn to Lori. I don't know if there's anything you know, if that's something that you would need to learn more about.
That's an agency that we know the least about. We had a meeting earlier today. We are the vice president for research across Virginia, the federal liaisons, and the APLU. We got a lot of great updates from Debbie Altenberg from the APLU, and that was the agency that is known the least about as far as their grants. What we hear the most about is NIH, which we've talked about already. But again, as we learn more, we will share back as soon as we have new information. One thing I wanted to just say. Oh, go ahead, Julia.
I was just gonna say, I didn't realize my response to Robin was private, but I did send Robin the only memo I have is related again to the DEI related work at NASA, but that otherwise what I'm hearing is business as usual at NASA, your grants should not be affected.
One quick related one, another cabinet level position that Julia did not mention is transportation. Is there any information on that?
Did you hear that? Any information about transportation?
Department of Transportation is very complicated right now because they had there is a massive infusion of cash that was in the process of getting pushed out the door with regard to two bills that moved through the 118th and 117th Congress. So again, the same DEI related issues at transportation, but then there was a secondary executive order that targeted inflation reduction and transportation legislation. And so there's an attempt that is already in the courts. So some of these executive orders have already been challenged in the courts. This is one of them because it is trying to go after funding that has already been obligated. But the department is caught up in that right now. So they are one of the agencies that is having a lot of communications freezes. So you might not be hearing from program officers. I'll also add that if you are hearing from program officers at these agencies where there is a freeze, help a Fed out and please be discreet about that because these individuals are not supposed to be reaching out. Many of them, if they still have access to their resources, have been trying to reach out to their faculty friends and let them know what's going on, but we don't want to draw too much attention to that. They're just trying to do the right thing, and we don't want to get them at odds with their employers. So that's what's going on with transport.
Great, thanks.
Matthew Joel, School of Architecture. Julia, just I have two questions. One, have you heard anything specifically about the community change grants program through the EPA? Where those are currently in the pipeline with awards signed?
Yes. Without getting into too much detail, and I'm happy to follow up, we have been in contact with regard to those two specific awards that were fully in the pipeline, with the exception, I think, of the drawdown of the funds. Those have been caught up and in this process, and so we're trying to figure out, again, those are already obligated funds, and so how those are treated are different than, or how they should be treated is different than what we're talking about as far as new programming at these agencies. So I have heard about that. I don't want to bog everyone down in the litany of those details. So happy to talk offline. Please give me a call after this or shoot me an email and we can connect.
That's great, thank you. And also just one follow-up question is, if we have colleagues that are, and I speak as for all senators who are wanting to reach out to the press or to want to, as my fellow senator was mentioning, what would we say to them? Because I understand and hear what you're saying, that you want to follow the direction of the university and what how you guide us, but are there words of advice in that that you could provide so that we can communicate that to our colleagues who are wanting to express their views about what's happening?
Yeah, and I don't believe in censorship of any kind. What my point was earlier, and what I'll reiterate is, please work with the communications professionals that are in your schools, your institutes, and with the university. If you're gonna, if these individuals are gonna be talking about their research at the institution, that should be worked through the comms offices. They also, they have protocols. They have ideas in place about what the best steps are for certain, for the specifics of whatever it is that you're looking to communicate with the press about. So I would just rely on their expertise and make sure that they're looped in, because we also, we want to avoid surprises where people are talking to the press and then there are stories coming out, or UVA is being outside of that faculty member is being asked for comment on things, and we didn't know that the individual had gone to the press in the first place.
And by the way, like, the answer to that question would be the same regardless of who is asking it at the university and what their job is. Like, we have paid professionals to help us with this kind of stuff, and we should all make use of them. I do it frequently, so.
Thank you.
Anything else? Can I take a couple more minutes?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Provost Baucom has announced, and Jim Ryan followed with the announcement, he will become president of Middlebury College in a very short 4 to 5 months from now. He has been at the University of Virginia for 11 years, 8 years as the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, and 3 years most recently in the position of provost. And you've been so generous with your wisdom and time with the Senate on many occasions. We're so grateful for your service to the university.
Thanks, Jim. No speech. Just thank you. I'm sure I'll make a speech before I leave, but today is not that day. Thank you. This has been the honor of my life, my profession. I love my wife. But it's been the honor of my professional life to be here and to be changed by this place and what it stands for and what it represents. And at the heart of what it stands for and what it represents are the faculty and the students and the staff that are collected. And at the heart of it, it's also just been friendship. It's been candor. It's been rigor. It's been being in the midst of incredibly difficult things together. And there's a lot of joy in my life right now. I am so looking forward to going to Middlebury, and there is a sense of loss of losing this. I want to thank you for the work that you do, senators. You do not have to do this, but for the representatives and the voice, so often the conscience and the question askers, the counselors of the faculty. And I'm grateful for Breaker. Good friend. No one could be more suited to step in as interim provost. She's been deputy provost, she's been vice provost for academic affairs, she's been acting in college. She was chair of the philosophy department. She was a faculty senator. She knows this place. She cares for it. He did not know until quite recently that we were going to ask, the president was going to ask. So if we can, could I just please ask that we thank Bree for That's it. President Ryan has announced that there will be a search. There will be more information coming about that soon. I stepped down from my role after the March board meeting. So I'm provost until that day. I will continue to hold the responsibility of being provost until that day. The next day, Bree is the provost. She's interim provost, but as interim provost, she's provost. We're going to stick around for a couple months. I'll be focusing on getting myself ready for Middlebury and the work that I get to do up there, but we'll be in town. And so it's not goodbye yet, but thanks everyone. I really deeply, profoundly appreciate it. So thank you.
One question on Margot's behalf.
Yes.
Sign PNT before you.
Oh, yes. Yes, clarity on that. So Mighty will continue the incredible work that she has done as has been with the promotion and tenure process. We will be making the PNT decisions because that process unfolds over the course of time after which I depart. And so Bree needs to be able to see all of those. So Mighty will continue her work. Mighty, thank you. It's really extraordinary what you do. Bree will be the provost who makes the decision on PNT cases. Okay, thanks, folks. Yep.
Thank you very much, Provost Baucom. Thank you, Margot. Thank you, Julia. Okay. So we have some support working on the function. Very good. Please be thinking of the family and colleagues of Professor Lucien Bass, who passed away in recent week. And President Ryan is representing all the university and asked to send his regrets to you, but it's important. He's at a 2 p.m. funeral service in Greenwood, Virginia today for Professor Bass. This is our agenda for today, and the EXCO who sets this has even given us helpful timings for today. And we are correct on schedule. We've been 40 minutes into the visitors' presentations. And Jeri and Michael and I, we're good. Would like to give you a welcome and thank you for your service on the Faculty Senate of the University of Virginia. Remind you that we're rules-oriented with our Constitution and bylaws, our Faculty Senate handbook, and other sources of discipline and procedure. Once in a while, visit our LinkedIn page. We take some photos at these meetings and publish them there as a wider outreach. Jeri or Michael, is there any you'd like to add at this point?
So this was taking place already. Thank you, visitors. We have circulated to you the minutes of the December 13 Faculty Senate meeting. Those are in your email inbox from about a week ago. And it would be time to tell us we need to make some adjustments, corrections to those. And we might be on a path to for a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second for that. Thank you, Aaron. And all in favor of approving the December minutes? All opposed? See any in the room? And abstentions? The motion passes. We have minutes. Those are deposited not only at the website of the Faculty Senate, but in the university archives around the summertime. They are deposited there along with some committee reports. Thank you very much. Next is the report of the faculty representative to the Board of Visitors, Michael Kennedy. Michael.
Thanks, Jim. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. We follow unprecedented kinds of presentations we just heard with closer to home presentations that are equally important to our faculty, to our staff, and to our students. So we can dive in. An update for everybody. We have some upcoming meetings of the Board of Visitors. On next week, the Executive Compensation Committee, which is a new subcommittee, will be coming together. I am not part of that, and I am not invited to that. I will have limited updates on meetings I don't attend. It's about the compensation of the provost and the president and the athletic director and folks on that line. January 28th is a meeting I will attend. This is a subcommittee meeting of the Audit, Compliance, and Risk Committee. This is the committee that oversees the investigation that is happening presently with the health system. The regular the regular board meeting is on March 6th and 7th. There's public and closed parts of that meeting I will attend. The provost mentioned this letter, which was sent just last week to our colleagues in the School of Medicine. I have it reproduced here because the next update I have that the provost did not have references this. So I'll take a moment now to let you know what this says. Dear faculty of the School of Medicine, this letter provides an update on the independent investigation that Williams and Connolly is conducting into matters raised. You can see the rest of that. This investigation is nearing completion. To date, Williams and Connolly has reviewed thousands of documents, including relevant email communications, records, and policies. They have completed more than 90 interviews and have scheduled or are in the process of scheduling the remaining interviews, which will take place in the coming weeks. These interviews, conducted to gain a complete and comprehensive understanding of the relevant facts, have encompassed participants across the faculty from multiple clinical and research departments, as well as current and former members of the administration of the School of Medicine and UVA Health, among others. The interviews have not been limited to those who, on their own initiative, have contacted Williams and Connolly. The interviews have also included and will continue to include individuals that Williams and Connolly has requested to interview because the firm believes they are likely to have relevant information. As in any investigation, the firm is taking steps to ensure this process is not one-sided and that it is gathering all relevant facts and evaluating them with an informed perspective. As the investigation heads towards its concluding stage, we recognize this has been a challenging and lengthy process for members of our community. We are grateful to the doctors and staff who have participated in the investigation and to the university community for its patience. Following the completion of interviews, we anticipate receiving from Williams and Connolly a summary of findings in late February in preparation for further deliberations at the next regularly scheduled board meeting. The board takes seriously its responsibility to ensure the well-being of UVA Health's patients, uphold the integrity of our organization, and support our talented doctors, researchers, faculty, and employees. We are committed to evaluating the results of the investigation with the utmost care and consideration to taking appropriate action based on the findings from Robert D. Hardy, our rector. I received last night this update from Rachel Sheridan and Porter Wilkinson, which provides further information and references the letter that the provost mentioned and I just read. As many of you know from Rector Robert Hardy's letter earlier this year, Williams and Connolly's independent investigation is now nearing completion. For those of you who have not had a chance to read Rector Hardy's letter, we encourage you to do so as it provides fulsome updates on the very thorough process that has been and is taking place. To provide one further update to that note, we wanted to share that the special board meeting will be scheduled for February the 25th. This special board meeting will allow for Williams and Connolly to share its findings ahead of the regularly scheduled board meeting on March 6th, during which we anticipate there will be further discussion. The board is committed to evaluating the results of the investigation with the utmost care and consideration, and will take appropriate actions guided by our commitment to the long-term success of the health system. As the investigation now enters the final stages of what has been an exhaustive and intensive process, we want to thank the many doctors and staff who have participated in the investigation. We are grateful for your time and energy. So I have inserted into the upcoming board meetings this special meeting. So the next two meetings, aside from the Executive Compensation Committee, will be wholly dedicated to the Williams and Connolly investigation, including late-breaking information that arose within the last week or so. I want to take this moment because this is a really critical moment, particularly for our colleagues and our staff members, our students in the health system at the School of Medicine, that this body, as of October 24th, passed overwhelmingly this resolution supporting with full throat our colleagues. And point number one, we affirmed our support of the faculty. We understand the stated scope of the investigation will include clinical care, retaliatory behavior, spending and financial concerns. Any new allegations and efforts to silence should be investigated. We recognize the voluntary nature of the investigation. We call on the Audit, Compliance, and Risk Committee of the board to commit to the timely public release of the report, and that the Senate and peer elected faculty involvement in decision-making for how to proceed. I bring this up because this has not changed. This body, this faculty of the University of Virginia, despite everything else happening in the world that will probably impact us too, this is impacting us right now and is a certainty, and we are standing with you. We are standing together. I could promise my work on the board has been comprehensive with phone calls and messages, working with them, and you can see from this plan for all of these meetings that are special, specific to this, the board is doing its work on your behalf, and this investigation has been as thorough and intensive as they said. That is the update I have. I will have more for you, of course, at our next meeting as some of these other meetings take place.
Are you invited to those two meetings, the audit and then the?
Yes, I am. It is possible that they'll go into what is known as super executive session. There's a regular executive session, and then there's super executive session. The last time they went into super executive session over this, I was and Lisa Kapelnik, the student rep, we were asked to leave. I have not gotten clarification if we will be included this time at this stage. Hi.
Are we going to hear the report or the results?
So the board is going to receive their update on February the 25th. They anticipate within that next month of time between now and then that the investigation will be complete. The report will be made there. The full board meeting on March 6th and 7th will, I would presume, further the discussion and finalize, and I would presume after that.
Do you think it would be appropriate for you to share the breaking information from the last 1 to 2 weeks? What you alluded to?
I can, I want to, yes, I can share it.
It's up to you. I'm
No, it's, I think it's a secret. A member of the Health System Board sent some emails to members of the Health System Community School of Medicine, encouraging them to come forward with information to participate in the investigation. And there was a very swift reaction to that.
specifically soliciting.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. That's correct. And there was immediate response.
I have a question online.
Keenan, please.
Yeah, I was just pointing out there was an additional communication from that board member even after it was brought forward, but it does sound like that is being dealt with from what I understand.
I have every assurance it is. I can't be public with what I have on that, though. Thanks, Keenan. All right, thanks, everybody, for your work, for your trust, and I'll be back in like 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Michael. The next item is following up the motion from the December 13th Faculty Senate meeting. Senator Brian Pusser, it was passed in the Qualtrics that followed in that week, 31 for, 26 against, 7 abstentions. And because the Qualtrics took place after the meeting, it doesn't go in the minutes of the December 13th meeting, but rather the minutes of this Senate meeting. And the full motion is here in the slides. And that's the update on our resolution on Prov 004. Next is the BOV Representative Candidate Statements. Michael Kennedy.
I'll have you know when I make threats, I follow through. We have this is the 3rd time of our new process, not all that new anymore, for how we select the next person to be our representative to the board. From our bylaws, the faculty representative is elected for 1 year. Nominations have already been made. A faculty representative and 2 alternates will be presented to the board based on an election that we will complete by February 15th. It'll be more like next week. The nominating committee has already solicited candidates. The current chair, James Lambert, will automatically be included if he is willing. He is. Then we have 2 additional candidates who have presented their willingness to serve if elected and then selected. So with that done, I am very pleased to present to the Senate our slate of candidates. It is Dr. Kim Aquaviva from the School of Nursing, Dr. James Lambert from the School of Engineering, and Dr. Charlotte Matthews from the School of Continuing and Professional Studies. Before we do anything further, I hope everyone will join me now in thanking all 3 of these folks for their service. This is not a small thing to put your name forward, to be heard from and evaluated in this very public way. Having done it myself, I'm very, very thankful to all 3. What we will do now is we'll hear from the 3 of them who will give a brief statement to accompany the written statement you already received. Following their statements, if there are any nominations from the floor, they can be made. Kim, I invite you first.
Thanks so much. So I am looking forward to Jim Lambert representing us on the Board of Visitors. I know that we're required to submit 3 names, and I believe strongly that we've elected Jim as our chair, and as the outgoing chair, I believe he would represent us well. So when you vote, I hope you do so with the intention as you vote for the slate of voting for Jim, because he is who I would vote for. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Jim Lambert, please.
Thank you, Kim, for your generous words. It's been so wonderful to work with you the past 3 years. And the other candidate, Charlotte Matthews, I've known her for more than 20 years, working with her for several years. And this is a team that this nominating committee and welcoming the floor nominations. I'm so proud that the Senate has every one of you capable to stand up and do this job. And that's the place of senators, is to be in training for leadership and representing our eminent faculty across the world, across the nation, and within the Commonwealth of Virginia. Provost Baucom had some very profound words about our unchanging values. And I would only add to that, that the values of the Senate are expressed well at the top of our Constitution and bylaws, that as senators, we represent all faculties. And that's a word we don't say too often, faculties. It means that we have skilled medical professionals, architects, attorneys, experts in the law. We have the engineering. We have the philosophies all across the College of Arts and Sciences. And we have the musicians and poets within that group. So what happens when we come together in the Senate is some way magical. I'm so excited to be a part of it with you. The last it occurred to me was when I took my first course in college, typewriting, and all of us were there together. So this is one of the values of the Senate. Second, we are advising the Board of Visitors and the administration on the welfare of this university. And in that capacity, we are some ways looking past our interests as faculty members. So it's a balance that my predecessor, Michael, has told me about, that I know Jeri shares that value. And I talked to some faculty chairs from the early 2000s, and they are with us still, thinking about us. The best advice from them, they said, accept every invitation, which is what I've been doing and the leaders of the Senate have been doing. My best day on the Senate so far has been the dedication of the buildings on Brandon Avenue for Professor Ramazani and Professor Gaston, where the leaders of the Senate, we had an opportunity to meet those family members and to hear the legacies of those great faculty. And I encourage you to visit there. There's coffee and restaurants in the bottoms of that dorm. It's the Versailles of the university now. It's Brandon Avenue. So thank you for all you do for the Senate and our 7 standing committees. Thank you for your underwater service on disciplinary panels and on these university-wide panels that we appoint. And I look forward to hopefully your vote in representing you. Thank you, Michael, for the nominations.
And Dr. Charlotte Matthews is on Zoom. Charlotte, when we see you, go ahead when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for accepting my nomination of myself. And I thought the best thing I could do is just on this day of tension, at this time of tension, just read you a little essay, because you've read my statement. So I can give you something creative for a moment. It's a little essay I wrote called Just the Way You Left It. My sister calls to tell me she is organizing her books based on the color wheel, starting with red, moving through orange and yellow, on to the greens and blues, and ending up with rose. No sooner could I let myself organize books by color than fly to the moon. While I recognize how striking it will look, much like a painting by Rothko, there's no way I could do it. I need to rest assured that Rilke resides next to Ezra Pound and that they are flanked by Octavia Paz and Theodore Roethke. 30 years earlier, I am in college, freshman year, and find myself adrift and lonely. I try most everything in hopes of fitting in. After my mother and I haul boxes in the stifling heat up the stairs of Eccles' dorm, my roommate, a kind girl from Southwest Virginia, asks which sorority I am going to rush. I look at her petrified, thinking we will soon have to sprint somewhere. I had literally no idea what she was talking about. Mid-September, I joined the crew team and I love it. The getting up in half light to run the stadium stairs, the way water slips under our boat as 8 of us pull our oars in unison is the closest thing I've ever felt to flying. I am briefly okay. I have a purpose, a seat in the boat. But after the first regatta, the coach pulls me aside and says I'm offsetting the boat. 5-1 just doesn't work for a crew team member. In late October, ginkgos on the corner, brighter than bright, I make my way to Alderman Library. The smell of all those books is better than walking into a bakery, better than the salty tang of low tide. It is all so right. There are carols lining every wall, and you can set up shop all day in solitude. Not a soul will bother you. Out the window, the wide playing field beside Memorial Gym. You can leave your backpack, trot off to class with your notebook, and come back and have it all waiting just the way you left it. Between the numbered floors are mezzanines where everything feels like a secret. When I get sleepy, I lay my head on my folded arms and take a nap. Or I meander the stacks, discovering that the Homeric hymns for children reside to the left of the Iliad. In 1984, the library stayed open until midnight, and many of us took advantage of that. Beside the one rumor of a stalker coming through and cutting off ponytails, there was not much cause for worry. So the night I fell asleep and went unnoticed by whomever had the job to lock up did not make me one bit afraid. When morning came, we greeted each other like longtime friends. Let's go get some coffee, I almost said. 4 decades have passed, and the library's undergone a major renovation. There are open spaces to gather, the entrance is accessible to all, and there is twice the seating for reading. Fittingly, it has a new name. What once bore the name of a promoter of eugenics now honors a man who bolstered public education worldwide. But the smell is the same. A mixture of vanilla and coffee and curiosity, and the carols are still tucked along the edges, little nooks to read and dream and try to figure out exactly where Cleopatra is buried, one of the remaining mysteries of the world. The Edgar Shannon Library, light-filled and majestic, is more like home than any place I can name. Thank you.
Beautiful, Charlotte. Thank you very much. Do we have any nominations from the floor? Or online? Which just seems less like a floor. Overpowering. Hearing none, this will be our slate of nominees. We will vote by rank choice. You will indicate your first, second, and third choice. You do not need to rank all candidates, although you may. The individual who receives the most first choice votes will be presented to the BOV as our faculty representative, presuming they have been ranked first by at least 50% of voting senators. And then the ifs. This is all in our bylaws. Are there any questions about the vote we will undertake? Hearing and seeing none, Ms. Kelly Craig will be in charge. She will pass out a Qualtrics ballot, and this will be completed within the beginning part of next week. I am to understand that at the meeting of the executive committee, of which I am not a member, on March the 5th, this decision will be made at the same time they will interview the student candidates and make their choice for the student. And the announcement may be made at the March 6th and 7th portion of the meeting. I'm unclear, but obviously I'll know, and I will transmit to you as soon as I do. I give one more final salute, and I ask that you'll join me. What each of these colleagues of ours just did took tremendous courage. All of them have a unique vision. All of them are worthy of leading and serving in this role. And so I'd say thank you one more time.
Thank you very much, Michael, and to your committee for your care with this. The next section of the meeting is on the motions for ad hoc committees, and Brian Pusser, you're coming to the front. Thank you.
So we can advance this here. Can you all see this okay? All right, well, I'm here with two motions from EXCO today that arrive seconded, and as soon as I finish explaining what we're doing, Aaron Bloomfield's also going to talk. I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the two ad hoc committees, and Aaron's going to talk about the other. But first, I just want to kind of clarify, this is the first time in a long time that we've had motions from EXCO to create ad hoc committees. So as you can see from the Constitution and bylaws, that the Senate can create ad hoc committees, and the chair and the members of a committee, if it's approved by the Senate, are determined by nominations and self-nominations. So after if we conclude this, and if the Senate deems to create these ad hoc committees, you'll be able to nominate yourself or others through EXCO, and EXCO will set up the membership of those committees. So let me continue by just going to when we need ad hoc committees, or why do we need ad hoc committees? Fundamentally, there are another number of things that come up to EXCO and have come up over the years that don't fall right under the purview of one of our standing committees. And so at that time, sometimes we've used working groups in the past on resolutions and things. And there's actually a Constitution and bylaws approach to this, which is to use ad hoc committees to create them, to have them do their work and then dissolve them when their work is through. And the two motions that you'll see in just a second are one to create an ad hoc committee on representation and governance, and the other to create an ad hoc committee on the revision of the Senate bylaws. So the two motions are here. They probably should come at the very end, but I just want to let you see the sort of formal logistical piece here, and then we'll just say a few words about each of the committees and why we see a need for them, and to try to encourage you, if the Senate agrees that we need these committees, to nominate yourself or others to serve on these committees. So the first is to examine Senate representation and governance, which I'll say more about in a moment. And then the second will be, which Aaron will introduce, is to examine the Senate bylaws. And in both cases, each committee's charge is to carry out this work, complete it by the end of the spring semester, prepare a report, and then then they'll be dissolved. Okay, so with regard to the Committee on Representation and Governance, the Senate's charged in its Constitution and bylaws to represent all the faculties on all issues that speak to academic affairs and other aspects of faculty work. But there are also, and we have 9 standing committees that carry out a lot of that work. But there are many what I call university level committees, or what we thought of as university level committees, usually coming from the Office of the President or the Office of the Provost, Vice President Provost. And a number of those committees sometimes don't include faculty. And when they do, they often include faculty who are not selected by Faculty Senate. So it's not that we see this as a serious problem, but we would like to get together and work with the Office of the President and work with the Office of the Provost and Vice President and Provost to find out some of their thoughts on how they choose faculty to serve on committees, what their goals are, and if there's a way we might put senators on important committees to talk to them, advise and consent about how the membership of faculty on those committees are put forward. So just to give you a couple of quick examples, there is a Provost Committee on Graduate Policy Committee that has 18 members. It's a pretty important committee. It has 18 members, including faculty, but has no members of the Senate on the committee. The Working Group of the Futures Initiative is another one under the Office of the Provost, a very important committee rethinking the future of the university that has 18 faculty members on it, but none of them are senators. And the other one that I would just put up is a very important committee we talked a lot about in the Senate this year, the Institutional Statements Committee, which came out, I believe, of the Office of the President, had 7 faculty who were not senators, and also the past chair of the Senate. And I think we also want to talk a little bit in the committee about if we're putting too much burden on the Senate, on the current chair, the past chair, and even perhaps the incoming chair, who are asked to serve on a number of committees in addition to the very large load that they have. The other aspect of this is that we want to improve communication across the board. So the reason we'd like to have at least talk about more representation on committees is to get more direct input on the activities of various committees that affect faculty work. And then also we want to look a little bit more broadly at the ability of senators to communicate with their constituents. In what ways are the rules different for senators who wish to speak at their general faculty meeting? Do they have regular communication ability, access to mailing lists and so forth? And again, just gather information, put together a report, and bring it back to the Senate with some recommendations as an ad hoc committee that could turn into motions at the level of the Senate if that was the will of the Senate. Just a couple of these things that I just talked about in more detail. And fundamentally, kind of to work with the administration to think about how faculty, when included, have been selected. Talking with school and department administrators about senators' access to their constituents. And then we'll come back with a report for EXCO and the Senate. So let me have Aaron, do you want to talk about the bylaws committee and then we can take any questions on either one of these?
So there are issues with the bylaws. There are some things that are outdated. There are some things where we do things one way in the bylaws, say we should do it another way. There are some things that are just missing. As a glaring example, we have no way to replace a chair. If Jim, Jeri, or even Michael were to up and leave, then we actually would not be able to instantiate a new chair during the time of their chairship. So a couple of us had talked about putting together a committee to work through the bylaws and to try to rectify some of these. I don't expect these to be particularly controversial. The intent is to bring them back in a month, just for some feedback to see what people think and to kind of slow walk it through the semester and eventually get it approved at the very end. As I said, I really don't feel like this is going to be controversial. We have enough controversies in our life without this. So that was the motivation for the ad hoc committee on working on the bylaws.
I'm going to turn it back to the slide on the motions themselves. I think it's like the third one. Okay, so I think we should just throw it up.
It's good.
Over debate.
Yes, we have debate, and if possible, we could have the votes in person here. That's the ideal to get it going. So who would like to make comments on we are not commenting on the substance, advice to the committees on their content, but rather the notion of having these committees at all. And that's the topic of these motions. Yes.
So maybe this falls into the category of what we're not commenting on. It's more to the point of what would be, what's under the umbrella consideration for the governors and representatives. So we're new to the faculty senate, and we've been trying to figure out our strategy for best representing our very diverse constituents. But it has struck me reading to the handbook and bylaws that there are no guidelines, best practices for representation. It isn't encoded anywhere. So there's probably many different ways that folks are considering their role as representatives. And I was really struck by the discussion about Provost Baucom, the role of the faculty council, where there seemed to be some consideration, and possibly I was hearing criticism about the GFC's the extent of how they were able to listen to their constituents and how they were able to represent them. And it did strike me that the same question is live for me in the faculty senate. I don't know how we are supposed to go about that. And if there aren't guidelines, should we be considering creating them? And is it possible to bring more to it?
Yes. May I interrupt and say, this is a good you're helping actually. It's a good example of what we'd like the committee to discuss. And what I've been instructed is to volunteer those people. Because if the motion should pass, we need volunteers today and in the next week.
Yeah.
Do that under consideration.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it is a committee, and to Jim's point, I'm sorry,
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, yes, you can hear better?
Just
Yeah,
hey,
sorry.
So there's a camera.
Okay, yeah, to your point, the committee needs to figure some of these things out. And this is one of the reasons we've delimited it and said we would, come back and try to get a motion, which is so we don't expand too far. But there are other committees where there's been sort of incremental faculty representation. The University Libraries Committee for quite a while had a designated person from Faculty Senate on a regular basis. I don't know if that's still true. I don't think it is, but again, the not knowing. And so what I really see the committee doing is coming back with a kind of inventory of, what's out there under that initial charge of we are to represent the faculties as best we can. And so in what ways could we do that better and contribute more to the committees that are set up at the university level if we had a process for consulting with the Office of the President, the Provost, and whichever else offices might be appropriate as they look for those many faculty from around the university who are on committees, but are not senators. And so we don't have direct reports and things for that.
Is there more debate on the procedure that we're implementing? So the motion is whether or not to bring the committees, either or both of these committees.
Well, my question is about this committee and representation. So just as an example, in our school, we only have 3 senators. In my 36-year history at UVA, I am the first person ever from my department to be a senator. I've been on plenty of university-wide committees. I've felt like I've provided service in a number of ways because of my background and what I bring to the table. But if it says that I have to be a senator in order to do that, then all of that would never have existed. And so I feel very strongly that one, from a senator who is volunteering their time, if now I need to be on 4 different other committees because I'm a senator, that potentially is an issue. But the other thing is, who am I not providing any leadership from or to? And also, will I be hearing from those individuals who just are in a small school and maybe would never have a chance to be a senator?
It's an excellent point. We don't know if we're going to have these committees or not.
I say no.
Points about the procedure. Any discussion from online? Hi, Eve.
I think 2 discussions and 2 votes.
Yes, separate, two votes, separate votes.
Can I say something just for Sue? I couldn't
Yes,
agree.
but
with-
very short,
Yeah, okay.
Brian.
I couldn't
It's
agree.
not
I couldn't agree with you more. And I don't think anything about this ought to be thought to be mandatory. If we come back and say it would be great to have people on these committees, but we don't have the number of senators to do it, it's too much of a burden, that would make sense to me. And I think that if there are people who are in the Senate who are serving on, well, I'll just leave it at that. I think zero is too low a number, but I don't think it should be.
Yes, Jeri.
I would say we also have talked about things like, senators shouldn't have to serve on all these, but when Vitae needs somebody from each from each school, should it come to Senate to say like, could Senate recommend someone from each school, even if it's not a senator, as opposed to it being like the dean who chooses this person, right? So not saying that it has to be senators who take these, but should Senate have a say in who chooses so that it's not a dean or an associate dean selecting the people who are on the committee that also are on the committee with the associate deans and getting similar input?
Yes, Kim.
The existence of this discussion to me seems to support both of those motions going forward, and I would vote yes because of that, because these are the kinds of conversations those ad hoc committees would have.
And let's ask the
controversial one.
Let's ask the committees to bring the dissenting opinion as well as the majority opinions. Any further comment on the procedure, Brian Wright?
I would just echo those words, and I'd be very willing to serve on that committee. I think it's important.
Thank you very much. Further discussion, points from online? Otherwise, we might go ahead. Might proceed. Is there another one? Call the question. The first to end debate, do we need to have a vote on that or just?
No, if there's no
unanimous,
further-
I'm
no
going to
further
take
questions.
unanimous consent.
If there's no further, vote.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, sorry, Charlotte Patterson. Or Charlotte Matthews. Did anyone have a question from online or point? Thank you. So
I think we can just go to the vote.
yes, so we're going to first vote on the motion on the Committee on Representation and Governance. And I'd like to ask all in favor of forming this committee through the end of this semester to raise their hands.
All, oh, are you helping? Sorry, please keep them up. Thank you. All opposed to that? Abstentions? Oh, there's no hands in the room. Did any?
There's some online.
Yeah.
Online?
Online, just confirming you're against. Okay.
They were residual.
Okay, residual.
Yeah.
And then abstentions. So that motion passes and the vote, Maria will tell us. Plus or minus one. Or two.
A lot to a little.
It was, it looked close to unanimous, so that we'll work out the precise numbers of that. And then second, without further discussion on the motion for the ad hoc committee on revision of
I
the,
think they get to discuss it.
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Is there
Any debate on,
any further discussion about?
or a debate on the motion to create the bylaw, ad hoc committees on bylaws?
All right, all in favor of this motion to on the second committee? Good. All opposed to that second committee? Are there any abstentions? Thank you. And I forgot, I abstained for both votes. Thank you very much, Brian and Aaron. And Aaron, please don't move away.
I'm not going far.
Thank you.
Give Michael 2 minutes.
And then the next is an update from Jennifer Greason and Aaron Bloomfield on a working group that's been doing this critical work since September. I can tell you, there's a lot that goes on in this area that is not appropriately not visible, and they're going to have some terrific progress for us. Thank you.
So we are here representing a working group on academic freedom and faculty discipline. And there are a couple of reasons for this. One is that the current policy is now 15 years old. These get renewed every so often. And the other is that there are lots of freedoms we have as part of our academic freedoms. But on the other side of the continuum, there are things that we would correctly get disciplined for. And in the middle is a great big gray area. And the intent of this is to shrink that a bit and to provide a bit more clarity as to how we would deal with things that fall within that gray area. This was formed by Maite Brandt Pierce, Vice Provost for Faculty Affairs, from a request from the Provost.
And I think the need for this kind of clarity, policy clarity, was really brought home to a lot of us last year. You may remember some of the concerns that our colleagues brought forward about different kinds of complaints about how, for instance, they were managing their classes, communicating with their students. So one of the things that Maite was doing with us at the very beginning was thinking about different forms of faculty misconduct. So we've got research misconduct, which would be like plagiarism or falsifying data. You could have accusations of all kinds of non-academic misconduct, which would be like financial misconduct, like embezzlement. It would include workplace harassment and bullying. It would include Title IX violations. And the university has sort of explicit procedures and policies for dealing with those kinds of allegations, but we don't have specific procedures and policies would be dealing with academic misconduct. So academic misconduct being allegations that a faculty member in the performance of their academic work is doing something that's wrong and requires discipline. So there's the problem that we don't have current procedure for these kinds of allegations that go directly to our academic mission and our profession. So that's obviously an issue and we need a policy for it. And then there's a question that's brought up a lot about sort of what is the extent of academic freedom and where is a line drawn between material that is a part of a faculty member's expertise and things that are extraneous, et cetera, et cetera. This policy is not trying to establish that line in any way, shape, or form. It's just putting in place a procedure to adjudicate claims that a line has been crossed. And so the question that we were focusing on is, who decides where that line is? Who decides when a boundary has been crossed? Who decides when there is actually academic misconduct by a faculty member that needs to be redressed? And we were following AAUP guidance on how that should work.
There's a couple different entities that provide guidance for how to manage this, and the AAUP provides some useful guidance, and we actually went through their guidelines as we were formulating this. In particular, if you are imposing a major sanction, there should be some type of peer review, a faculty review committee, not just the deans or the administrators making the decision. The other one is that there should be the ability to provide a minor sanction. Right now, the faculty discipline policy, it kind of says its termination is one of the few types of consequences, and the lesser consequences are not really provided for in that statement. So we believe we follow that particular guidance, and those I think were important to all of us even before we read this.
So as a sort of side part, is it like an amendment or something of the policy? And there's a proposal to establish a new standing university level community, which we are calling the Committee on Faculty Academic Conduct, which would be that place for peer review of questions, allegations of academic misconduct. So the CFAC is a proposed new university level faculty community that would exist to review and, if needed, investigate allegations of academic misconduct. Wherever you understand that these kinds of allegations and complaints can come into the university from many different paths. They could come to individual officers of the university. They can come to HR. They can come, all kinds of places. This is establishing one procedure, one place that they would be gathered and evaluated, one central location at this committee. The CFAC also then would serve as a faculty review panel for major misconduct allegations that are not necessarily academic misconduct specifically. So it would have that role as well. The committee will be composed of faculty members with representatives from all schools. Subcommittees will hear specific cases. The committee members, the faculty members of the committee will be trained in best practices, and they will have staff support, sort of like the Title IX committee does. We were concerned about how the members of this committee would be. We didn't want them to be directly appointed by the provost. So right now we're saying that the committee members will probably be selected in the same way that each school selects its faculty senators. Those policies are different with different schools. For instance, in the college, we elect to committees like this. So the faculty would elect the members of the CFAC, but other schools might operate differently.
So this is the current proposed procedure. And before I walk through this, let me point out, there are like 12 different entities within the university that investigate misconduct of one type or another. Title IX, for example. And if any of the misconduct falls into their realm, then it doesn't even come before this process. So first, obviously, some sort of accusation would have to be made. And the dean can outright dismiss it if frivolous. There are a lot of people who teach politically sensitive topics, and somebody who disagrees with those topics could raise an allegation of academic misconduct against the person. So the dean has the ability to just outright dismiss it. Otherwise, if the dean doesn't dismiss it for whatever reason, the faculty member is notified and has the chance to respond. At that point, CFAC is going to determine, it's sort of like doing a grand jury investigation if there are valid charges versus an actual jury judgment, a jury for the formal case. So CFAC determines if there is merit, sends recommendation to the dean and the faculty member. This is whether or not the case should even proceed at that point. This is not yet a recommendation as to an action. Again, the dean can decide how to proceed. The dean could dismiss it outright, or could decide to proceed with it. If she decides to proceed with it, then CFAC actually will be charged with the investigation. And again, they're going to be trained in this. There's going to be a lot of support from HR, for example. They are going to send the results and the recommendation to both the dean and the faculty member. And this here is the faculty review committee. The dean, again, when the dean gets it, she decides how to proceed, can dismiss the case, can take a minor sanction, which we're listing here as a non-punitive action, or can take a disciplinary action, which ultimately can result in termination. Any disciplinary action would have to go through the provost's office for approval. And of course, the faculty member could then grieve to the Senate following the currently existing procedures.
And one thing that I would point out is that like right now, the first place that a faculty member would get to be heard by faculty peers would be at a grievance. So you would actually have to have a punitive action. Which is not ideal. Okay, so the policy, the revised policy, in draft form right now, does provide for a number of non-punitive actions so that it would be possible to hear a case to find that there was misconduct, yet to handle it structurally in a way that doesn't have to go over to suspension and termination. So verbal reprimand, letter of expectation, performance improvement plan.
So this has been a committee of about 6 of us, just trying to get an initial draft. But this is going to go through the full presentation to the Senate Policy Committee. This is even going to go before the entire faculty, similar to how the recent P&T committee. So this is something that Marty is going to take her time, making sure that there are sufficient comments that can be collected, and then if necessary, the policy can be modified. The aim is to get this completed by the summer, so it's in effect for the fall semester.
And on the one hand, we want to take our time with it, but on the other hand, given the, as Brian said, hostile climate that we are likely facing, it really behooves us to have policies and procedures in place to deal with this kind of situation.
This is who we are. Natoya's online. Matt's in the back. I don't know if Bill Brady, I didn't see him online or not. And of course, Maite, who was, this was sort of formed under her guidance.
Thank you to all your committee. Are there comments and working group? Thank you. Jeri?
So just a couple questions of logistics, thinking about when this is going to come through policy committee. Like, how many people do you expect there to be on the CFAC? Like, is it just one from each school, or do some schools have more representation? And then when it comes to these investigations, like, I imagine it's not going to be the entire CFAC that's involved in every single investigation. It's like, some subset. So just, I don't know, I'm just thinking about when this comes through policy committee, these are the types of questions that I'm sure policy will ask. So just throw them out there. You don't have to answer me now, just adding to your list of things to make sure that
I'll include it in the addressed, yeah.
Briefly, we expect there, quite frankly, to be more cases from the college because the college is larger and the college tends to teach things that are more controversial. How to design a computing algorithm is not as controversial as some of the topics that are taught in a college. So that would have more representatives as a mean to split the load among those on CFAC.
Sue?
Well, my question is just really, thinking about the punitive or the expectation that in our country, you're innocent until proven guilty. And I don't really see a support mechanism to defend the faculty member from a very early start of what resources might be there to, if an allegation was brought up in bad faith, or, You know, if that person feels targeted for some reason, you know, what are the realms before this person gets thrown out, going through these committees? There's relatively little confidentiality and things with bigger committees. And if it turns out to be not true, or if there was a problem in another way where you were accused of something that might not have happened, or, you know, whatever, then, you know, where does the faculty member have support from a very early start in terms of defending themselves properly?
No, that's an excellent question. On one hand, I think we wanted to avoid having lawyers on each side. Currently, the faculty member has the ability to respond. The faculty member has a somewhat neutral, ideally neutral committee that is going to create this judgment. You know, if the Senate feels that there should be someone advocating for them, I mean, we can certainly consider adding that.
Well, I think, you know, even honor committee, things like that, they do have representation and support for that individual that's going through it from a very start, because, you know, we do live in a country where that's usually the rule.
Yeah, this is still innocent until proven guilty. Yeah, we'll certainly keep that in mind. Maite, do you have any comments on that?
I'm just taking notes. I think
Okay.
it's really helpful. Yeah, so
Ryan.
keep bringing on ideas.
Ryan Pusser.
Yeah, so I just thank you for the work you've done. This is a really important committee.
We're
Working
group.
Ad hoc. Ad hoc work.
Infectious.
I want to go back to the role of the dean, and also I guess this is a kind of question about whether we're talking about something that's advisory or whether this is something which is this committee is going to pronounce judgment and that will be that. So the dean can dismiss a case or forward it to the CFAC. If the dean decided that person didn't like the outcome that CFAC came up with, can the dean come back and say, I don't want part of that? I'm gonna go ahead, or how this is going to be a decision-making body or an advisory body, I guess is what I'm at the end of the day.
CFAC is advisory. Like a job search, the search committee makes a recommendation to the chair or the dean who makes the ultimate decision. That being said, if CFAC were to say this person's innocent and the dean still wants to dismiss them, as noted, slide over a little bit. As noted towards the bottom, if there was an actual disciplinary action, the provost would also have to approve that as well.
Okay, good agreement.
And it could get.
Yes, of course.
Great, that's helpful, thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
So, this committee will consider cases of or accusations of academic fraud.
No, academic fraud would be research misconduct.
Okay, I couldn't remember whether that was really.
This is gonna be like things that are introduced in a classroom that are problematic, that kind of.
Kim.
Richard Hines
Oh,
as the virtual.
Richard Hines, are you able to turn on your mic?
My mic is now on. So the idea of an advocate may be a great idea. I just wanted to note that there's not a general right to advocacy when you're accused of things in the United States. It's a limited right for some serious crimes. I just wanted to, the law professor in me wants to chime in and just correct that. And I'm curious as to what what is done. And you mentioned that there are many other committees or other bodies that police possible misconduct by faculty. I'm curious. I'd like to know what are the advocates provided in those other areas.
That's an excellent question. I don't have that information on me.
At least we have the Faculty Grievance Committee. We have the ombuds, university ombuds, and the faculty guides in the provost's office. Those have been where we refer people from the Senate. And Title IX is another. Yes.
I just wanted to make you aware, I'm sure you probably already are, but the college is doing the same thing. I encourage you to please talk to them, Bonnie Gordon and somebody else.
We know that. Yeah, Matt and I have met with that committee.
Thank you. Yes, a hand is online. Who can you read his name? Peter?
Peter. Yes, in
in the School of Medicine, and Bill probably informed this to the committee, there's a robust process when it deals with clinical privileges. What we've seen is those allegations carry over into the School of Medicine, which then becomes very opaque. And from some work on the grievance committee, I can see where this is very much needed throughout the university, but we're probably going to have to think more on the members of the committee, the expertise of what's needed to review the issues at hand. But peer review across the university, I think, really needs to be enhanced.
So I agree. And again, this is an initial draft. We are going to be bringing this before the Senate Policy Committee and the entire faculty because we want to make it better. We want to get more feedback on this.
Thank you very much, Jennifer and Aaron and your committee. The next is Scott Ballenger is going to give an update on our initiative of the Provost's office.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you again. Scott Ballenger from the law school. As I've mentioned a couple of times, the provost volunteered some funding for some joint programming by the Faculty Senate and the Provost Office around issues of free speech and academic freedom, if you all want to do it. A bunch of you have sent me some ideas. I took them to Ian and Jim, and we talked about some of them. And where they would like to start is with a series of sort of moderated discussions. So think more Charlie Rose than Oxford Union, people, yelling at each other. Jim even offered to moderate one or two if it was an appropriate topic and we could find, a time when he's available. Just, as a place to start, we're open-minded, but Jeri made a great suggestion that you can often have a better conversation around a sort of specific concrete event than talking about ideas in the abstract. And she suggested the 2023 Stanford Law Speaker disruption incident, which I'm sure some, if not all of you, heard about, I hope. Where a talk by a fairly conservative federal judge from the Fifth Circuit was disrupted by students, and then an associate dean jumped in to sort of both defend the speaker's right to speak and the importance of the First Amendment, but also to raise some, questions about the value of what the speaker was saying. And the whole thing went viral, and there was a letter from the dean about 10 days later, raising serious questions about what had happened. I really like that idea for a sort of first discussion because it's really hard. I mean, there's really good arguments on both sides and a lot of gray in it. So it shouldn't be hard to find participants, both internal and external, who would want to talk about it. And, from there, I could imagine doing something similar about the line between academic freedom and the academic misconduct that the last presentation was about. I think that would be really interesting. We could talk about the pros and cons of relatively restrictive time, place, and manner restrictions on speech in the university environment. Andy had ideas about that and how to make that happen. We could, I'm personally very interested in the line between free expression and sort of hostile environment, Title VI, Title IX concerns. That's a problem that nobody has ever really solved. So I would love a few volunteers, one or two at least, both to help, make sure that we can actually pull this together quickly, and to make sure that what we do is aligned with what the Senate wants, because the Provost's Office really did want this to be a joint venture rather than just something that the Provost's Office was doing. And I want to be clear that we don't want to present what I just said as, exclusive or, the only thing that we can do. Eric and others have suggested that we not just do analytical debates, but invite the arts in some, important way. And I think that's a terrific idea. Something I would need an enormous amount of help with, because I'm just a lawyer and nobody would nominate me to organize a poetry reading. Yeah.
Scott, for all your work on this, Kind of a friendly amendment or suggestion. I think the Stanford case is a really interesting case. It's not typical, but it is at a private university. If you're gonna go beyond, and full disclosure, I went there. If you're going to look at not only the moment of conflict, but then the ways in which pressures and forces were engaged, it's very different than what would happen in a public university. Because we are a public university, it might be great to start off with a similar kind of conflict, and we can find plenty of them, that happened in a public university. The governing boards are very different. The reactions, the ways in which President Provost faced the climate around the challenge is very different in public and private. So just put that out there.
So
Think about it.
No, it's a really important point, and the way that I was thinking about, handling that would be to sort of first set the stage with what happened there, and then talk about both what we think about that and about how it might play out differently at UVA because of exactly those reasons. But if you or anybody else have a concrete suggestion about some other particular event, please send it to me and let's talk about it. The thing that I really liked about Jeri's idea was the idea of picking some specific concrete event to ground our discussion.
Yeah.
If the goal is deep engagement on current controversies, I lean toward Eric's idea, although not necessarily the arts, but that instead of talking about free speech, that we model it and pick some current controversies and have people either do creative pieces or whatever it is, but for us a role model that we can have nuanced conversations about current controversies in ways that are congruent with all of our rules and policies, but also are expressing academic freedom.
I couldn't possibly agree more, and I just forgot to say it. I mean, so in addition to these sort of big picture meta questions about academic freedom in the abstract, let's actually talk about some controversial, questions. And I don't know where you want to start. The CAS review in England, or
Great place to start.
things that things that we don't ordinarily feel comfortable talking about, but that need to be talked about, right? So yeah, send me those suggestions too.
Good, Eve.
The picture, in a sense, has changed in the last 96 hours. And I'm guessing that some of this, comes from meetings and ideas that you had before that. And one of the places that we've seen free speech brought up and referred to is in the Facebook firing of all, of large numbers of fact checkers, and being used in a certain way that to justify certain kinds of actions that actually not really consistent with academic values, right? That the opposite, that free speech now stands for sort of rampant play of opinion, or the opposite of fact checking, right? And that might be, I don't know, I'm just saying, well, let's talk about the way that this phrase is now used in the political sphere, right? Rather than sort of, let's also consider the status and uses of the concept of free speech and its,
In the relationship between free speech and what we call academic freedom, right? I mean, are there particular ways that the obligations of an academic environment and the scholarly enterprise impose upon us that we should engage with each other in some ways, but not others? Is all of this being abused?
Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you. EXCO has asked the committee chairs to send read aheads and to provide slides ahead. And we had between December 13th and last week, when those read aheads were due, most were on holiday. So we're going to ramp that up over the next meetings. But if there is a message from any or all of these committees, even, this would be the time. Is Lisa Colosi-Peterson here? It's a quite busy committee, and you're not making a report. It doesn't reflect on the huge amount of policy review that you all are doing.
Hi there, Jim. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. It's perfect.
Hi.
Thank you.
Want to thank the Senate again for their participation in the review of Provost 017 that had to do with P&T. We have sent in our collective feedback based on the committee review actually today. And then I just got another request for additional review related to a proposed revision to a policy that has to do with rights and responsibilities of investigators on sponsored programs. So certainly very relevant to the work of the faculty. And a reminder that anyone could log in at any time to the box folder that is linked to our part of the Faculty Senate webpage to see what policy revisions we're working on, and then offer their feedback so that we can provide it through the appropriate channels when we send back our feedback. Thank you.
The big innovation of fall 2024. Thank you for that. There is a new chair of the Faculty Senate Faculty Grievance Committee. That's Peter Hallowell. Thank you, Peter. And Juliet Hatchett, you have done a tremendous job. Such big effort since you became chair in July 1st, and she's taking a parental leave. So Peter will serve through June 30th. Thank you, Juliet.
Thanks, Jim.
And Peter, is there anything to report? You're just getting started. It might be your first day. Sue and Brian Wright. Simon.
Concentration.
Saliva, we report that.
We did that last time, so we're good with that. But the location change for Monday's meeting.
All right, so we had to shift. We were over in Booker House, I think, but we've moved it for all the committee members there. We're going to do it here in the Data Science School in room 300.
Thank you very much. Then Brad Kesser, and with support of Alan Beckenstein, chairs the Faculty Recruitment, Retention, Retirement, and Welfare Committee.
Hi, thanks, Jim. We haven't met this year, but we met in December, and Maite was kind enough to present the faculty exit survey data. So there's aggregated faculty exit survey data that we reviewed, and I charged the members of the committee with coming up with some wellness initiatives. And so there's a new faculty wellness program that I need to talk with, I think it's Jenny Knight, but Maite has put me in touch with her. So the new year we'll meet probably in the next week or two to plan kind of our second half. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Brad, and to all your committee. And Jim Savage and Jennifer Greason from Finance Committee.
Jim has arranged to have Julia Smith come talk to us. She may be busy now, but that was going to be our next event.
Very good.
To be to hear from her about federal funds.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. It was out of it.
And Eric Ramirez Weaver and Alicia.
Sure, I can just tell you very briefly. We're extremely grateful to Bree Gertler and Krista Akampora, who are actually coming to meet with our committee on March 3rd with regard to the Task Force on Religious Diversity and Belonging. We have a meeting on February 10th to prepare some questions, but if anyone would like to either give input or have their concerns or celebrations likewise somehow involved in that dialogue, we definitely encourage your participation. Or you can send me an email, emr6m@virginia.edu, and I'm happy to also add those to the conversation.
Thank you, Eric. Hui Wang.
Yeah, I'm online, and we haven't done any business this year. And last December, we made OSP. We had a good conversation with the OSP, and we are going to have our next meeting next Friday, actually. So we can give update in the next meeting.
Thank you very much. So, and then we're coming into a landing for this reception starting at 4 p.m. Every school and the non-schoolers now have opportunity, according to it's either the handbook or the bylaws, to submit updates to their election of senators procedures. Those will be due February 1, thereabout. So if you're thinking there's a inconsistency with the way things are done, or you want to have a update, it's really up to you. The Senate doesn't second guess, as much as I know, the selection election procedures. And then there's an Athletics Advisory Council ongoing. The Parking Committee has 3 senators appointed to it, Ben, Jessica, and Bill. Thank you very much for that. And then Jeri and I attend the UVA Chairs Summit, and Kim is there, and maybe some others of you are there. And there's some big events coming with that in the next month or two. And thanks again to Peter for taking over the grievance committee. Maite or Bree, is there any to say, because you're usually way in the front of the agenda, but there's a possibility.
I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Nominating committee, real quick.
Yes, let me finish one more thing. This meeting with the Faculty Senate of Virginia was canceled due to the Richmond water crisis. We still have this on the table to discuss, and please, Michael Kennedy.
Yeah, just really quickly for the nominating committee. It's myself, it's Jeri, and a couple other EXCO members. We are happy to have further members of the nominating committee. It's not a lot of time. And the big charge is what I'm about to say to you right now, is we are now that we're about to be past the BOV, which was the time sensitive. Now our charge is to recruit chair-elect. I believe we have two or three open EXCO at-large seats, and we are looking for multiple candidates for each. Even if you're a new senator, you haven't done much with the Senate, we look forward to hearing from you. So if you're interested in helping with finding these folks on the nominating committee, let me know. If you are interested in leadership for next year, please let myself, Jeri, know for beginners, and then we'll have the rest. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Brian Pusser.
If people want to self-nominate or nominate someone for either one of the ad hoc committees, representation and governance or bylaws, should they send them to you? Or where
Yes,
should-
what I'll do, I'll announce in a FS All announcement that the motion's passed and that they can contact any member of EXCO, me or Kelly. Are those good channels for it?
Sounds great.
Very good. Thank you for that point. Are there, it might be time for a motion to move on. Is anyone thinking that way?
I move, we move on.
Thank you, Brian Pusser.
Second.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, all faculty. Senate.
Thank you.
Sure, I'll send the